Korean stocks opened sharply higher this morning, recovering from yesterday's steep drop. As investors went bargain hunting, the Korea Exchange activated a buy-side sidecar, temporarily halting program buying for 5 minutes. South Korea's consumer prices in January marked the smallest on-year increase in 5 months, by rising 2% from the same month a year earlier. Top diplomats of South Korea and the United States are set to meet in Washington soon, amid renewed concerns over the Trump administration's tariff hike threats. This will be their first meeting since the two countries released a joint summit fact sheet in November. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. The Korea Exchange activated a buying sidecar this morning at 9:26 a.m., halting program buying for 5 minutes. The measure was triggered after KOSPI 200 futures index rose to 759.15, an increase of 36.55 points or 5.05% from the previous day's close. It's the first buy-side sidecar on the main bourse in 10 months and follows a sell-side sidecar activated a day before. Under exchange regulations, a sidecar is activated when futures prices rise by at least 5% for 1 minute. The benchmark KOSPI closed Monday at 4,949.67, plunging 5.26%. However, the index rebounded this morning, recovering past the 5,100 range early on. South Korea's consumer prices increased at the slowest pace in 5 months in January, extending an inflation cooling trend for the second straight month. According to data released Tuesday by the Ministry of Data and Statistics, consumer prices were up 2.0% from a year earlier. The pace of increase slowed by 0.3 percentage points from December. Petroleum product prices showed no change from the same period last year, helping to ease overall inflation pressures. By contrast, prices of agricultural, livestock, and fishery products climbed 2.6%, with rice and apples among the items posting notable gains. More and more fans of Korean culture from overseas are buying Korean products directly online. And now, for a few years in a row, these numbers have been growing, while in 2025, there was an even bigger jump. Our Kim Do-yeon explains more.
Overseas demand for Korean products continues to rise with the help of an expanding attraction to Korean culture. According to the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Monday, reverse direct overseas sales, domestic companies selling directly to foreign consumers online, reached 3.02 trillion won, or around $2.1 billion in 2025. This represents a 16.4% increase from the previous year and marks 3 straight years of growth. By product, the demand for K-food has driven unprecedented growth. Online exports of food and beverages skyrocketed 49.2% year-on-year, reaching a record 112.9 billion won. To put this in perspective, sales stood at just 46.5 billion won in 2023. They jumped to 75.7 billion in 2024 and surged past the 100 billion mark in 2025. Cosmetics sales also rose by 20.4%, while clothing and fashion-related items posted a decline. Regarding imports or overseas direct purchases, the market grew by 5.2% to approximately 8.5 trillion won. China accounted for the largest share of this market. Purchases from China increased by roughly 15%, capturing 65.5% of total overseas direct purchases. This is attributed to the increased use of large Chinese platforms like AliExpress and Temu. In contrast, direct purchases from the United States decreased by 17.6%. The overall domestic online shopping market also grew, reaching a total transaction volume of 272 trillion won last year. However, the growth rate was 4.9%, the lowest growth since 2017. Data officials addressed questions regarding the impact of the Coupang incident and data breaches late last year. The ministry stated that whether these issues affected the total figures was not clarified, as specific transaction numbers for individual companies are not disclosed under statistical protocols. However, they noted that the overall market trend remains stable without unusual fluctuations. 김도현, Arirang News.
Amid mounting concerns over the Trump administration's tariff policy towards South Korea, Seoul's top diplomat is to hold talks with his U.S. counterpart this week. Our Kim Bo-kyung reports.
South Korea's top diplomat Cho Hyun is slated to have talks with his U.S. counterpart, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, in Washington, D.C. on Tuesday local time. The meeting will be on the sidelines of Wednesday's U.S.-hosted ministerial meeting on critical minerals. According to Seoul's foreign ministry, this is their first in-person meeting since South Korea and the U.S. released a joint summit fact sheet on November 14th. The two sides plan to hold comprehensive discussions on how to speed up the implementation of follow-up measures to the joint fact sheet, such as nuclear-powered submarines and the expansion of South Korea's authority over uranium enrichment and spent nuclear fuel reprocessing. The two could also discuss President Donald Trump's recent tariff hike threat from 15% to 25%. Meanwhile, Trump announced through his social media platform Truth Social on Monday that the U.S. would lower the reciprocal tariff on India from 25% to 18%. This following his phone talks with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, where India agreed to stop buying Russian oil as requested by the U.S. to cut off Russia's war financing. Saying that India decided to buy much more oil from the U.S. and potentially from Venezuela, Trump stated that trade deal of lowering tariffs to 18% will take effect immediately. With the additional 25% tariff penalty that was imposed due to India's imports of Russian oil also removed, the overall tariff on Indian exports to the U.S. will sharply go down from 50% to 18%. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
At a New Year's press conference, Prime Minister Kim Min-seok dismissed arguments that U.S. President Donald Trump's renewed tariff threat last week was triggered by South Korea's investigation into e-commerce giant Coupang. Our correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
Prime Minister Kim Min-seok says the claims linking U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats for South Korea to Seoul's probe into the U.S.-based e-commerce giant Coupang are, quote, completely unfounded.
Some media outlets have suggested that Vice President Vance has strongly warned or pressured South Korea over the Coupang investigation, portraying it as Washington's primary concern. That may reflect Coupang's own position, but it does not align with the confirmed stance of the U.S. government.
Speaking at his New Year's press conference on Monday, the Prime Minister said President Trump's social media post announcing a tariff increase on most South Korean goods from the negotiated 15% to 25% was instead tied to Washington's request for faster implementation of the agreement reached during tariff negotiations. He appeared to be referring to the Special Act on the Management of Strategic Investment between South Korea and the United States, submitted to the National Assembly last year, which provides the legal basis to manage Seoul's $350 billion investment pledge to the U.S. in exchange for lower tariffs. The bill is currently pending review by the relevant standing committee before it can be put to a vote. Kim said this understanding of Washington's position was confirmed through multiple communication channels, including his newly established hotline with Vice President J.D. Vance.
We exchanged direct contact information right there and then, including that of Vice President Vance and White House Deputy National Security Advisor Andy Baker. We've already been in frequent communication.
Regarding South Korea's ongoing investigation into Coupang's massive data breach, Kim reaffirmed that while legal issues would be handled strictly in accordance with the law, Seoul and Washington have agreed to maintain close communication to prevent this from escalating into unnecessary trade friction or misunderstandings. This follows growing scrutiny in the U.S., where some have raised concerns that the investigation may be overly stringent because Coupang is a U.S.-based company. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Moscow says it will consider South Korea's stance on Ukraine when shaping future bilateral ties. In a statement on Monday, Russia's foreign ministry said relations with Seoul will be guided by Russia's national interests, highlighting South Korea's participation in sanctions against Russia and whether it supplies lethal weapons to Kyiv. It noted the Lee Jae-myung administration's willingness to improve dialogue and economic ties, but said real progress depends on external conditions, including the Ukraine situation. Moscow added that both sides are conveying their positions through diplomatic channels, including a meeting between the two foreign ministers at last September's UN General Assembly. Meanwhile, the United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks in Turkey this Friday, raising cautious hopes for renewed diplomacy as both sides try to curb tensions and avoid a wider conflict. This will be the first meeting between the two countries' officials since the collapse of the negotiations and the 12-day war last June. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The United States and Iran are set to resume nuclear talks on Friday in Istanbul. According to Iranian and U.S. officials who spoke to Reuters, the renewed diplomacy comes amid efforts to ease tensions over Iran's nuclear program and to prevent the risk of a broader regional conflict. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi are expected to meet, while representatives from several Middle Eastern countries, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Egypt, are also expected to be in attendance. The talks signal a possible reopening of dialogue after months of heightened rhetoric and stalled negotiations. Both Washington and Tehran have recently indicated a willingness to return to diplomacy, even as differences remain over the scope of Iran's nuclear activities. The talks come after U.S. President Donald Trump on Sunday played down recent warnings from Iran's supreme leader about the possibility of a regional war.
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Trump added that the U.S. has a strong military presence nearby and voiced hope that a deal could still be reached, stressing that the outcome would ultimately test those warnings. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghaei said Monday that Tehran is currently reviewing the terms for restarting negotiations. His comments suggest Iran is open to talks, but cautious about the conditions attached.
Various points have been exchanged. At this stage, we are reviewing and deciding on the details of any diplomatic process, which we hope will reach a conclusion in the coming days.
According to Iranian sources cited by Reuters, Washington has proposed three main conditions for resuming negotiations: zero uranium enrichment in Iran, limits on Iran's ballistic missile program, and an end to its support for regional proxy groups. Iran has long rejected these demands, calling them violations of its sovereignty. However, two Iranian officials told Reuters that internally, Tehran may see restrictions on its missile program as a bigger sticking point than limits on uranium enrichment. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The date of the comeback show in Seoul for K-pop supergroup BTS has been officially set, and the performance will be live-streamed to more than 190 countries around the world on Netflix. Big Hit Music, the entertainment firm that manages BTS, said this morning that the event, titled BTS The Comeback Live Arirang, will be held on March 21st at 8 p.m. at Gwanghwamun Square, one of South Korea's most iconic landmarks. The show is to mark the release of the group's fifth full-length album. And this is not the first time that BTS has performed in the heart of downtown Seoul, as in 2020, the group performed at Gyeongbokgung Palace's Keunjeongjeon Hall and Gyeongwon Pavilion as part of a special week on NBC's The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. The upcoming show is set to become the first major event in South Korea to be broadcast live globally on Netflix.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. The Trump administration is facing another major legal hurdle as civil rights groups move to block a sweeping immigration freeze, with a lawsuit claiming the government is illegally dismantling decades of established law. A group of civil rights organizations, including the National Immigration Law Center and Legal Aid Society, sued the U.S. State Department in federal court in Manhattan on Monday. The groups want to block a policy that suspended immigrant visas for citizens from 75 countries on January 21st, arguing it undermines long-standing immigration law and is based on what it calls a false claim that nationals from those countries are likely to become public charges by relying on welfare. Plaintiffs say the pause has already separated families and blocked high-skilled professionals, while the State Department argues it's needed to safeguard resources and improve security. Britain's former U.S. Ambassador Peter Mandelson resigned from the Labour Party late Sunday after newly released files appear to show a potentially criminal connection between him and Jeffrey Epstein. Newly released U.S. Justice Department files suggest Mandelson leaked a confidential government briefing on economic policy to the late sex offender. The documents also indicate Mandelson received donation payments totaling up to $75,000 from Epstein, but he denies any recollection of the money. Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Monday called for Mandelson's removal from the House of Lords and ordered a full cabinet review of the security breach. British police are now reviewing the matter to determine if criminal charges are warranted. Elon Musk is consolidating his empire into what investors are calling the Muskonomy. The Tesla CEO announced Monday that SpaceX has acquired his artificial intelligence startup xAI. The deal combines the rocket manufacturer with the maker of the Grok chatbot to create a tech giant valued at $1.25 trillion. By making xAI a wholly owned subsidiary, Musk aims to use AI to scale SpaceX's mission towards interstellar exploration. The merger arrives just as SpaceX prepares for a massive public offering later this year. At the Grammy Awards in Los Angeles, Bad Bunny won Album of the Year, marking the first time a Spanish-language album won the event's top prize. Bad Bunny won the award for his album Debí Tirar Más Fotos. During his acceptance speech, he dedicated the win to people who leave their homeland to follow their dreams, and he also criticized the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Hope your morning commute was a smooth one. Many roads and sidewalks were covered with black ice from yesterday's snow. After a freezing start, temperatures will rise significantly during the day and stay on the warmer side. But on Friday, cold air will return, dropping down the morning lows to -9 degrees Celsius again here in Seoul. Meanwhile, eastern regions remain very dry. Strong winds will increase the risk of wildfires. Please be cautious to ensure fire safety. And this afternoon will be 1 to 7 degrees Celsius higher than yesterday. Seoul will be getting up to a much welcome 5 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gyeongju, Busan will be all getting up to 9 degrees under mostly sunny skies in many places. While a severe cold snap is expected this weekend, a winter mix is in the forecast in parts of Jeollado and Jeju Island at the end of the week. But for today, please drive slowly and walk carefully even if the roads look clear.
Now that is all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korean time. Stay tuned.